Before you watch this video, please note that there will be spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So if you do not want to be spoiled on either one of these games, please click away now. Alright everyone, this is a retrospective look at Final Fantasy VII Remake, also with a little bit of intermission as well. Now, I'm sort of starting with the end here, and we're going to tack this on probably to the end of the last part as well, so you can see it in full context. So, the footage is already recorded, and that is what you'll see next after this video, but I wanted to kind of give the retrospective in its own video as well, for those of you who may not care necessarily to look through all the footage and like my comments as they come along. But so what we're determining here is how well does Final Fantasy VII Remake hold up to Rebirth. Now, with this topic comes obvious spoilers. There will be heavy spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. As I'm not reviewing Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm reviewing how well does it stand up after having played Rebirth. So if you have not had a chance to finish Rebirth and you don't want to be spoiled, this is not the video for you. This is the video for you if you have played Rebirth, you know, whether you've beaten it, platinumed it, or you've seen the game and don't really care about spoilers, and you kind of want to know if if it's okay to go back to Remake, if it's going to like ruin your experience with Remake after having played Rebirth. That's kind of what I'm looking at here. And primarily we're going to be talking about story elements as well as gameplay elements. Those are going to be my main two focuses. Now, I will mention before I get into those two aspects, graphic-wise, because this is very brief, it all holds up. It's the same engine, of course, so it's going to look pretty much the same. I mean, it does obviously look better in Rebirth, but, you know, it holds up well enough. And if we're talking about performance mode to performance mode, which is the way I play because my television only goes up to 720p, so it doesn't even make sense for me to record on graphics mode. So if we're talking about performance mode to performance mode, it looks good. The only issue I have graphically is that some of the flashes, like from Sword, like slashes from Cloud, end up being like too bright or like too much. And I didn't remember that being a problem until coming back to this game after Rebirth. But yeah, like there's some like weird flashing from, I think some from like Barrett or some from Cloud that is kind of weird, and it's like a little jarring. But other than that, like, again, no problems with graphics. Now, I'm going to go into the story elements before I go into gameplay. So story elements, there are a couple things that kind of I was looking for, and some things that were kind of a little interesting to me. So one of the things I was trying to look at, and you'll see as I play through the game if you want to actually go through my footage as I release it, is one, is there any clue that they left behind that makes more sense about like the whole timeline stuff, or any like cryptic elements as a result of having Rebirth? If you go back to Remake, does it actually give a better clue or more insight that you don't get from just playing Remake and then Rebirth? Does it like make more sense going to Remake, Rebirth, and then going back to Remake? Does it make it more clear? And the answer is probably not really. But there are some cool stuff, cool things there. So like, for example, if you played both games, most fans will probably have picked up on in the flashback in Nibelheim where Cloud is like, he's, that agonizing thing where you're going through trying to get to his mother, and you hear her say the words, you have to leave, you have to live. Most fans probably picked up on those were Sephiroth's words to Cloud in this game in Chapter 2. Now, I remembered that, and I was anticipating it, as you'll see. I talk about it before it happens. But what I was not anticipating was when he says that, he looks up. Cloud looks up and has this like moment of recognition in his face before he gets really angry and attacks Sephiroth. And like on first playthrough before Rebirth, it's like, okay, he's in shock, he's in disbelief, and then that turns to anger. He's like jilted out of it and just boom, attacks. But now, with this new context, we understand that look of recognition isn't just him snapping back to reality. It's a look of recognition that Sephiroth is taunting him with his own mother's dying words, which makes that scene better. Very interesting. Another thing to note about story is so some of the times that Cloud or somebody else has visions of something they shouldn't, the Whispers show up. And now, what we were led to believe in the original, in Remake, rather, not the original FF7, but Remake, was that the Whispers show up to prevent Destiny's course from being altered. And Aerith has this line about losing a piece of her every time the Whispers touch her, and I'm sure some fans had theories that were correct about what that actually meant was her losing her memories, because in Rebirth we find out that they don't have any memories of the future that were given to them in Remake. And so now we understand what that actually meant, like confirmed. But it comes back to these interesting moments where sometimes Cloud has a memory he shouldn't. For example, in Chapter 3, he sees a vision of the plate falling and like debris falling on him from Sector 7 plate crumbling and falling. And the Whispers show up. Now, they don't do anything to Cloud, seemingly. And so, before Rebirth, you might be wondering, why did they show up there? What happened there that made them show up? And what I believe it to be is that they took that memory from him when they showed up. They showed up because if Cloud had potentially retained that memory, he might have been able to stop the Sector 7 plate from falling. There is a chance. But it's also interesting that he has visions of Aerith's big moment, which we all fans knew. Original fans knew what that was when they saw it. There were a couple times in this game where he sees Aerith. This moment right here with the materia falling. And the Whispers do not show up. Interestingly enough, it could be that having that memory and letting it stick when it was not enough to prevent it from happening. Case in point, look what actually happens in Chapter 14 of Rebirth. So it's interesting the Whispers do not show up there in that particular moment. Now, you might be saying, well, but doesn't he actually save her in another timeline? Yes. But this is beyond the point where the Whispers have the control over Destiny's course. This is the point. By that point, it is Aerith and Sephiroth controlling the Whispers as far as we can tell. Or sometimes some will of the planet, whatever weapons may be controlling some Whispers, who knows. We still don't have full picture on that, but I do find it interesting that in those few moments where Cloud sees Aerith dying, one, he may not have the full picture. He may not know that that's her dying, even though the one time we see the single tear roll down his face in beginning of chapter 9, I believe it is. And so it may, because it was not, that alone was not necessarily enough to stop that event from happening. And so that's kind of interesting. And I don't really want to go too much further into it because it's like any further, it's like starting to theory craft, and I don't want to get involved with the theory crafting community. No offense, guys, but it's not my thing. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because it does kind of make some of Remake's scenes like more interesting to like look at if we're looking at it from this like Remake timeline standpoint. Other than that, there's not a whole lot. I mean, Aerith knows a couple things, like, and we know what she meant by certain things, like, when she's talking about freedom and hesitating at the end, like, I think she knows that she's going to lose those memories. And so one of the reasons it's terrifying is because she's not going to know, she's no longer going to have that knowledge of the future, so she doesn't know how to prevent it. But there's still that freedom that it can still happen because we've changed the flow of destiny, right? So that does, it kind of gives like a little bit more context to like why freedom may be like terrifying to her, even though people talk about it before, like that, you know, she's lived in this kind of bubble her whole life, and it makes sense why she would be afraid of the sky and why she'd be afraid of like freedom and stuff like that, where she was like comfortable in her own bubble. But that may also be another aspect to it. So that is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, there's not a ton else that, like, going back to Remake story wise, like, makes that much of a difference to me. But it holds up. Like, there's not, okay, so there is the one thing that doesn't hold up, and that is the Marlene scene. And I've talked about this in my Rebirth playthrough, but if you've never seen it, and I talk about it in the Remake playthrough when I get there, and you know, once that footage comes out, you can listen to it for yourself. But I'm gonna say it again, or for the first time for some of you. The Marlene scene doesn't hold up, and what I mean by the Marlene scene is when she, you know, she hugs Aerith, and then she gets the vision of Sephiroth killing Aerith and whatnot, and so, and it doesn't hold up for a very simple reason, and it's like, she calms down from those visions, but what she saw was fucking horrifying, and I don't know how anybody would be calm after that. So that doesn't make sense. And if, you know, for my rabid, you know, defenders of everything remake / rebirth, go ahead and show your child a scene of, you know, someone that they view as scary killing another human being, and see if that stops them from crying. That's we're talking about the same Marlene that was scared of Cloud walking up a couple steps. Like, okay, yeah, that's the same Marlene that would definitely not be scared of seeing a scary man, her words, not mine, killing Aerith. I don't know. To me, that just seems indefensible to me, but it doesn't really hold up. That's the only thing. Everything else holds up. So I'm going to move on, and we're going to talk about gameplay, because gameplay is really kind of like the main thing to look at here, in my opinion, when we're talking about does this hold up. And the short answer is yes. For the most part, of course. And I'm going to go through character by character and talk about each one. Let me just take a quick sip here. So, I'll start with the easy characters, and that'd be Yuffie and Barrett. So Yuffie has the benefit of having been developed last, and, you know, potentially having been like a test for Rebirth, because one, we get to test out the perfect block system, which is great. And of course, they just straight up give you deadly dodge and parry to start, which I didn't even use them, because I didn't even think they were really necessary. Like, her deadly dodge is okay, and the parry's whatever, but she basically plays the same as she does in Rebirth. The only major difference being that, like, obviously there's not as much air combo freedom, but you don't really need it that much because you have the ninjutsu, and her mobility's still good because of the shuriken throw, and then you can just like jump to the shuriken. She has all her ninjutsu. She has Windstorm, Art of War, and Banishment, and Brumal Form even. So all things that are very useful, and in my opinion, things I used prolifically in Rebirth, and they all basically function the same. The only thing I saw that was a little different was the way ninjutsu was done. Was, I think, like, fewer hits per like combo, like one hit fewer per combo, which is like the most minor thing. It doesn't really affect anything. She still has like insane ATB gain because of like Remake has better ATB gain in general than Rebirth does. Like, even just like passive ATB regen is very, very good in Remake versus Rebirth. Like, they actually slowed it down a lot. They nerfed it, which I'm gonna get back to it when I talk about Aerith. But so I mean, Yuffie pretty much plays identical mostly. Obviously, you don't have like Doppelganger. You don't have some of these extra abilities, but like, you don't really need it for like a 2-hour game. Barret, I kind of view as the same. Like, Barret is pretty much the same as he is in Rebirth. Like, he has, in my opinion, pretty much all of the best abilities in Rebirth in this game as well. If you use bonus round a lot, if you like rely on bonus round a lot, then sure, you'll notice a difference. But that's kind of natural. That, of course, they added extra abilities in the next game, and so like, if you come to rely on those abilities, you're gonna feel it. But honestly, like, for me, like, Barret felt almost identical. Yeah, not much to say there. Now, Cloud is interesting. Like, so when you're in your operator mode, it's more or less the same for the most part. The only thing is, like, okay, a couple things, like his holding square in operator mode is like, if you're doing it consecutively, it's a little slower. If you're doing like focus thrust raw, like with no combo, it's a little slower. Like, there's a little pause. Braver, there's definitely a pause in Braver in Remake versus Rebirth. So some of his abilities are a little slower, but he still plays pretty well overall, and his deadly dodge is good. But you have to put deadly dodge on. So, like, if you want like his deadly dodge combo, you have to put it on. Of course, he's missing his blade beams, and he's missing his like awesome air combo ability, and like something like triple slash, like arcing straight in the air to like flying enemies. Like, doesn't happen in this game. So, like, clearly you're going to be missing that. However, his Punisher mode, his attacks are actually faster than they are in Rebirth, and of course, because of that better ATB regen, you're actually going to be gaining ATB at a faster rate in Punisher mode, and his attacks are faster and probably deal a little bit more damage overall. So, like, there is that, and it's actually kind of interesting how that works. Now, as you know, combat in Rebirth versus Remake, the Punisher mode has a different attack, whereas like in Remake, he's still just slashing in his spot, just in a different place, whereas in Rebirth he's going side to side. And so in Rebirth you can kind of get more AoE with that, like you can hit more enemies when you're going side to side because you have a bigger horizontal hitbox, but the attacks are slower and not as powerful. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. But to me, going back to Remake, Punisher mode felt good. It felt real good to me. But of course, like, same thing I was talking about with like Barret or Yuffie. Like, if you rely on something like Prime mode, you'll be missing that in this game. Or especially like the blade beams and like the going up in the air. Obviously, you're gonna miss that. Tifa is, to me, the most rough in comparison. Now, Tifa's still a lot of fun in this game. I still very much enjoy playing as her. You can still do things like when you do the uppercut, you can still dodge to cancel the uppercut like you can in Rebirth. So that's still there. But her uppercut is so much slower. It is very noticeably slower, and it slows down her combo ability a lot. On top of that, her deadly dodge is not that good. It's okay. It's like, like that kind of whirling kick is her deadly dodge attack. And you have to use the parry in order to get her that really fast roll, like where she does the slide from Rebirth. You have to give her parry, which if you do that, you get a really nice dodge, but you don't get to zip across the battlefield like you do in Rebirth. Like, that to me is the biggest, like, most noticeable thing. Like, in Rebirth, you dodge and attack, and Tifa just freaking zips to her enemy. Like, she flies across the battlefield, and it makes her so much fun in that game. In this game, you still have to get up close and personal with them to like really get going. Whereas like if you're with Cloud, if you hold like square in operator mode, he still kind of tracks to the enemy pretty far to do that that attack, the spinning attack in operator mode. But yeah, for Tifa, she doesn't really like track as far. She doesn't zip across the battlefield like she does in Rebirth, for those reasons, she's definitely a little rough in comparison. So to me, she's definitely the most difficult to go back to, but once you get used to her, she's still a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, she's still my second favorite character to play as, other than Cloud. Her Star Shower is more OP in this game than it is in Rebirth. They kind of nerf it a little bit. It's still very good in Rebirth, but Star Shower is just fucking nuts in this game. So, there is that trade-off at least. And her dive kick's still very good. Of course, and just like with Prime mode, if you really like her like Reverse Scale or Unfettered Fury, you're gonna be missing that in this game. Like, I love Unfettered Fury. It's when you have Rage and Fall, you just hold square, and she just does this crazy ATB gain, and it's nuts. And of course the air combos as well, same thing. Now granted, she's better in the air than Cloud is in this game. So there is that, but it's still not the same. And then we come to Aerith, who for me, I kind of save her for last because she has like this kind of weird dichotomy here, because on one hand, she is missing some things that are very good about her in Rebirth. On the other hand, she plays a little bit smoother than she does in Rebirth in some ways. And I'll explain what I mean. So the obvious like negative is the lack of ward shift, right? So not having the word shift is, and it actually hurts me in a couple areas of this game. Like, you'll see when I get to the arsenal, like, my word's like way out there, and I'm like, I can't get to this in time. Like, I need to just make a new one. So having that word shift is very good. Now, and of course the other thing, like the fleeting familiar coming automatically from Tempest in Rebirth is nice. Versus like you have to actually spend ATB to do it. However, some of the things that for me like are sort of like weird, not really weird, but like make her actually more fun in this game is you can hold square to just do the combo instead of having to tap it. It just made it, I don't know, just made it smoother. And then the other thing is, because I talked about the ATB regen, her ATB regen is horrible in Rebirth. Like, you have to really like set her up with good stuff to get her good ATB gain. Like Radiant Ward, which of course if you use Radiant Ward a lot, you're going to be missing that in this game. But you don't actually need it that much in this game because the ATB regen is much better in this game. So you just hold square and she's getting ATB actually very quickly. And on top of the fact that, like, say, like, Firaga only takes 1 bar of ATB instead of 3, or 2, not 3, 2 ATB versus 1, you actually have better action economy without Radiant Ward in this game than you do in Rebirth. So in that respect, Aerith's actually better in this game. Now, again, granted, she doesn't have certain things, like, again, Radiant Ward, which is really nice to have, or the interruptibility of level 3 magic is obviously better in Rebirth, because even though it only takes 1 bar, like, you can still interrupt it like any other casting in Remake. So there is a bit of a trade-off there. And of course the break damage limit as well makes it more powerful in Rebirth. But that aside, it's kind of like it's very weird because, like I said, like, she's, in some ways, she's better in this game. Jesus. So fucking annoying. Sorry. Phone's just getting blown up. Anyway, she's actually more fun in this game in some aspects, but not in some others. So obviously she has more abilities in Rebirth, and certain things like Ray of Judgment and ATB Ward only take 1 bar in Rebirth versus Remake, which I understood. I kind of understood Ray of Judgment in this game, but ATB Ward, yeah, like, and it functions differently. So it's more of like a refund, like, disorder. So it's pretty good if you know how to use it, but at the same time, like, a lot of characters, like, it works. It's good for Aerith and it's good for Barret, I think, more than anything, because they're more like stay still in that ward and shoot off shit, you know. So yeah, like, in general, not character specific, like I said, ATB regen is generally speaking better in Remake, and so that's actually, to me, that's nicer. It's nicer to come back to this and actually have ATB quicker, and like I said, passive ATB regen, just running around, you get it way quicker. Yeah, like, certain things like ATB boost is quicker in Rebirth though, so, like, whereas it's like in Remake, it's like, whereas Rebirth, it's done. It's kind of how it is. So that's definitely better. Obviously, I talked about air combos. Air combat is so much better in Rebirth. It's not even funny. And like Remake puts you in a certain situation, namely when you're heading up the support pillar, where you have two characters that are ground people and you have people in the air, so it kind of like pigeonholes you into using magic or trying to suffer through with shitty air combos that don't really work. And of course, like I said, having the parry dodge and deadly dodge automatically assigned to them without having to worry about materia slots is definitely something that is needed and you do miss in this game. Now again, all these characters still hold up well, they're still good, but there are certain things you're going to miss, clearly. And one last thing I'm going to talk about gameplay wise, it's sort of gameplay wise, sort of other miscellaneous, is Chadley. Now Chadley is better in this game, in Remake, and it's pretty clear. Like, if you like the way Chadley is in Rebirth, you shouldn't miss. Even then, you shouldn't not like the way it's done in Remake, because in Remake, he's there in certain intervals. Like, he's there in hub worlds for you to do stuff, like in hub cities or whatever you want to call them, like big places. Whereas, in Rebirth, he's fucking everywhere, other than main cutscenes. Thank God he's not in the main story generally. Because I like Chadley, but he's in it way too much in Rebirth. Like, he stops you all the time. Hey, Cloud, you did the thing that you just did. I'm telling you, even though you just did it. And I have a new combat sim, even though it says it on the screen. Like, he's got to stop the gameplay. Stop what you're doing. I have to tell you that you did the thing, even though you did the thing. Whereas in Remake, you go talk to him whenever you got new shit or whenever you want to do stuff, and then he'll be like, all right, I developed a new materia, done. I don't understand why that wasn't more of a thing. They should have had just the shit on the screen, and then you go back to Chadley whenever you're ready to go back to Chadley. He doesn't have to come to you every time. So if you don't like the way Chadley's handled in Rebirth, then Remake's even better for you. Then it holds up even better because he's not annoying. He's not intrusive in this game. You go to him. He doesn't come to you. Only in the beginning does he kind of inject himself, and that's fine. You have to introduce us to Chadley before we start to go to him. So, I mean, it's very clear the way I feel. I think objectively it's better in Remake because, again, even if you like the way it's handled in Rebirth, or if you don't mind it, it's still non-intrusive, but you pretty much always have access to him except for certain areas of the game, which is still true of Rebirth anyway. You can't access him in the Mithril Mine. Or main story, or the Cave of the Gi, you can't access him. So, it's done very similarly, except it's in a very non-intrusive way, to where you can go to him if you want to. It's very optional. So, I would say objectively it's done a lot better in Remake, and so it holds up even better than it did previously, because if you go from Rebirth to Remake, you're like, oh wow, this is way better. At least for some of us. Some of us maybe not so much. Some of us maybe wanted more Chadley, and that's fine. But I think my hope is for part 3 that they go back to the way Chadley was in part 1, or somewhere in between. Sure, you may have to go do world intel stuff, but I'm hoping there's less gameplay interruption, because dude, like every time you do the summon thing, beep 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 beep, Cloud, you did it. All right, thanks, bye. Or like, new transmuter chip. Hey, Cloud, you have a new transmuter chip. Like, okay, great. You couldn't have just put that on the screen and then showed it the next time you opened the map. Like, come on. Anyway, that's it. So overall, does this game hold up to Rebirth? Absolutely. 100% it does. Is it better than Rebirth? No. I mean, clearly, like, Rebirth does a lot of quality of life changes and, you know, for the better for the most part. With some exceptions, but I think if you're looking to go back to Remake and hoping, like, it's not going to be like a terrible experience after going through Rebirth, I'm here to tell you that it shouldn't. It shouldn't be. Like, of course, they're subjective. Like, everybody's going to feel a little different, but in my opinion, the game holds up very well. And I figured it was going to, because it's, you know, it's still all the same engine. It's still, you know, the same stuff. They just updated things a little bit and fixed certain complaints. So, like, if you can get past the air combat stuff in Remake, if you can get past, like, some of the minor annoyances or missing some of the abilities that you have in Rebirth, like, you're still going to have a blast if you love it. If you loved it the first time, you're still going to love it. Like, again, you may just have, like, some things that you, like, kind of are missing out on, but it should still be a very good experience for you. That's my personal opinion. So, that being said, you know, feel free to check out my footage. I have plenty of hours worth of content to go watch. If it's not up yet, it will be, you know, in the next day starting. And, you know, I'll talk more about each aspect as I get to it. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.